too funny.
We're going to call to order our first hearing of the Board of Appeals. This is a November 1st, 2016 series of hearings, and we have our first hearing at 7:30, and this is on the application of David Hoffman and Mary Murphy. The application is dated October 5, 2016, and the applicant is seeking, or the applicants are seeking, to install a detached garden shed to the right side of their residence, which is located at 8 Rockwell Place in Milton. The bylaw requires that the accessory building be set back a minimum distance of 8 feet from the property line, and here the applicant is proposing that the shed be set back 1 foot, I guess 6 inches, 1.5 inches from the right side lot line of the property. This property is in a residential zone district. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening to my immediate right is board member Jeffrey Mullen, and to my immediate left is board member Stephen Lundbaum. The rules of the board are such that we'll hear from the applicant, then we'll hear from anyone who wants to ask questions of the applicant or speak in support of this application, and then we'll see if there's anybody present who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. I've summarized the advertisement. We'll have as evidence at the hearing the September 27th, 2016 application signed by both of the owners. We have some computerized plans that show the proposed shed from various dimensions. We have a September 27th, 2016 denial letter by Mr. Prondak. And we have a plot plan of land that's dated August 22nd, 2016 by Robert E. Hannigan Associates of Thatcher Street in Milton, showing the existing dwelling and the proposed shed and its location on the lot. So we note that the applicant is represented by attorney Marion McGettrick of Milton, Massachusetts. So welcome back to the Board of Appeals, Mrs. McGettrick. We're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. Very nice to be here. This is Mary Murphy, the applicant, or one of the applicants, and she contacted me after she had filed the application. So I've been able to review it, and I did write a letter, but you know it's essentially the same information.
Thank you very much.
So this is an application for a small shed, 1 story. The dimensions are in the application. I think it's 6 by 14 by 1. Let's see, 6 by 14 by 1 story, and it is proposed to be located within 1 foot 5 inches of the right side lot line. This house is, I don't know if you had a chance to drive by. We didn't bring pictures, but I'm going to describe it because I did go and look at it. This is a sort of typical bungalow-style house. You've seen a few applications for variances for this style of house. It had a full 2nd story, but the 2nd story is set back from the 1st story. And it was in, not completely decrepit condition, it was in poor condition. So the applicants purchased the property, and they've done a complete renovation. The house is really beautiful now, and it's been extended towards the back of the lot. So they did not have to apply for any variances. They managed to come up with a renovation plan that didn't require it, despite the fact that their lot is about 4,900 square feet and has 50 feet of frontage. So it's a narrow rectangular lot, and it's one of these lots. I gave you a copy of the original plan. In these subdivisions that were laid out in many parts of Milton with very small lots, usually around 5,000 square feet. So now what has happened is they find that they do need a small storage area outside. There has been sort of a wildlife infestation in the neighborhood, and it has become really imperative to have a place to securely store recycling and a trash barrel and maybe a little bit of lawn implements. So that's the reason they need the shed, and to put a shed alongside so that they can get their trash and so forth out to the street would mean, in either case, that they'd be very tight, because their house is exactly the required distance from the lot line. So in order to put a shed there, you'd have to have a variance. And this shed is a long, thin design, so it's sort of like the lot. It's narrow, and then it extends back. If you were to look at the lot, you would see that the applicants have put up a new fence on the right side. It's a wooden fence, very attractive. Starts out kind of low, and then it rises up. And what's the height of it as it goes towards the rear? Is it 8 feet?
No, it's a 6-foot
6 feet.
fence.
Okay,
6
so it
foot with
starts low and-
7-foot posts.
Okay. So in any case, there is a fence between the neighboring lot on the right and the proposed location for the shed. There's also, the neighbor's driveway is on the right, and the house is set further away because it's on the other side of the driveway. The applicants have spoken to their neighbors, including the neighbor on that right side. I have 2 letters from neighbors, and I have to give you the addresses because they're not provided in the letters, so these are the 2 notes. The neighbor on the right side has no objection to granting the variance. We didn't ask for a letter because of personal circumstances, it was difficult to do that. But there has been nobody has expressed any opposition to granting the requested relief. Pasiri is 5 Rockwell Place, that's one of the notes, and Evelyn and Mossy Murphy are at 7 Rockwell Place. And as you might expect, they're actually Mary Murphy's parents. She's moved back into the neighborhood right across the street from her parents. But, they were nice enough to write a note, so we provided it. So the shed itself, you have a sketch, but it's going to be designed, with a shingle roof. It will be gray, the same color as the house. There are no windows on the side of the shed. There's a window in the back, and there's a door in the front. So basically, from the neighbor's house, you see the fence, and you might see the top of the roof of the shed. It's only 1 story. And the house is truly transformed by the work, so I'm not surprised the neighbors have been pretty supportive of this application, because it has definitely improved the whole area, the work that's been done, and it was pretty shabby before. I don't have anything else to add. I do think that this would merit relief in that the neighbors don't oppose. The lot's very narrow, so that it's very difficult to put anything else alongside without intruding on the required setback.
Let me ask you, would you have any photographs of the house? You don't have any with
We
you?
don't, I just got to see the house yesterday myself. I should have brought a camera when I did that. But we can certainly submit them, but it would be after the hearing, so I don't know.
No, that's all right, because I have a Google photograph. I think it's of the house, but I think it shows a shabby house.
Yes.
Yeah, probably.
And it also shows a structure to the rear of the residence, and it looks like some type of a shed or a barn that was out there to the rear.
That's been removed, correct?
That was a 1-car garage that was originally there, but the roof had collapsed on the garage, and the right side wall that supported the garage had also collapsed. So we had to take it down, and the foundation had cracked in half as well. So we took that whole thing down.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what this photograph shows. It shows some black spots on the roof, and
Yeah.
it's probably holes in the roof. I guess the simple question I have is, why don't you put the shed back where the barn was rather than put it next to the residence?
There's a patio on the right-hand side in the backyard right now.
Okay, see, I can't see that
Yeah,
here.
you can't see that.
It's really
So
not shown on the plot plan either, is it?
I don't think so.
I
I
don't
think
think
I
it is.
gave you a plot plan, or my original, my one
have a
here
copy.
has it. I can show you.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's on
yeah.
here.
It might not be in the one that Mr. Hannigan did,
Oh.
though that's probably not the most recent one.
See, here's the one we have, Marion.
I think that was the one that the town had when we submitted our permit, but that's different.
patio.
That has the patio.
But if it does, I don't see it. This is August 22nd,
I can't read the
2016.
date on mine because it's slightly
Yeah.
to one side. I don't know why there would be just a plot plan.
I don't either.
No, it's the same plot plan, but what I did was I put on the
Okay,
patio.
You sketched in.
I
the look.
sketched in the patio and the landscaping.
All right, that's why it's not in.
So there's
But you
only
can
a-
have that one.
So where's the patio?
Right where it says patio.
Oh, okay.
So,
So
Mr. Chairman,
there's only
Thank
that
you.
small green grassy area there, and we have a little toddler, so we wanted some area that he could, play around in. Plus, there's no way to get the trash in and out. There's no walkway back there.
Okay. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, please.
So is it there already? Because the letter from the building commissioner, when I read it, it seemed like it was there. It says the shed as installed, but it's not there.
No, I looked at the property, it's
No.
not
Right.
there.
So maybe he's referring to if it were installed. Okay.
I assume
So it's not there.
yeah. It's, no, this isn't an after-the-fact
and
application.
This is custom?
That, no, actually, you can actually order them that long and skinny.
Okay.
Yeah, they,
It's going to be brought in as a whole unit, or is it going to be constructed at the property?
I think it's modular, so they'll bring in the four sides, and then they'll put the roof on. And then basically, I put down crushed stone and some blocks, and it'll sit
So it's
just
going
there.
to sit on the
It'll
stone,
sit
no
down.
foundation?
There'll be no foundation.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Lundbaum.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McGetrick, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I do note, though, that the building inspector did slightly misspeak in his review, but there's no shed there now, so.
Okay, he may have used some awkward language, but that's fine. So let's see if there's anybody present who has any questions. Is there anyone present who has any questions or who otherwise wishes to speak in support of this application? And the record indicates there's no such person present. Is there anyone present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to this application for variance? And there's no such person present, so unless you want to add something, Mrs. McGetrick will end the evidence portion of this.
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, good.
Can I just ask one more question?
course.
I know, Marion, I know that you gave us the addresses of the people, and you said that the property owner on the right had no objection. Is that right?
That is
At
correct.
10 Rockwell Place?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll end the evidence portion of the hearing, and it's our obligation to discuss this application in open session and vote on it pursuant to the open meeting law. So, Mr. Lundbaum, do you want to be addressed?
Oh, thank you, Chairman Leonard. Thank you for your application, ma'am. Very well presented, as usual, by Attorney McGetrick. I know the area well. I have a close friend who lives on Rockwell. I think I have seen the house since it's been redone, and it's a very nice, tasteful renovation that was done down there. I think I would tend to vote in favor of the application in light of the fact that the most affected abutter does not seem to be in opposition at this point. I am aware of this issue with this so-called wildlife infestation in the area. I can understand the need. It is a bit close to the sideline, but again, in light of the lack of opposition and in fact the support of some other neighbors, I would tend to vote in favor.
Okay, and just for the record, because I don't live in this area, the wildlife infestation is some type of nefarious rodents of some type.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not raccoons or other...
It's not squirrels.
Squirrels are more friendly types of animals.
I agree.
Mr. Mullen?
I agree with Steve.
Okay, do you have anything else you'd like to
No.
add? And
I think it's
Support of
terrific.
this application?
I'm going to support the
you're going to
application.
support it, okay. Well, look, I agree with my colleagues. I think the application's very well presented. When you look at the picture of the residence, which is the nasty cottage, and you look at what's there now, it's a dramatic improvement. This is a substantial deviation from the zoning bylaw, and many times we consider these types of variance applications very, very carefully, because we don't like to start precedents, sometimes even if everyone agrees. But on the facts of this particular case, with the fence being up, with the substantial money that's been spent on the renovation of a property that is, it's a scary property on this particular photograph. The wonderful patio you have that didn't exist there, the barn, which, or the shed, I guess it was, that previously existed, it really is something that's a safety hazard and a fire hazard, and perhaps worse if young kids got in there. And I do think that this shed is positioned as tastefully as it can to maximize its utility. In this unique circumstance, I agree with my colleagues, and I'll support this application, but put something in the decision, the board will, that this isn't to be universally applied and generally applied, because these are very particular and unique circumstances, and I think not only do you have the sense of the neighbors, but you've got a beautiful fence there, which basically shields it, and so I think under these circumstances, I'm inclined to vote for it. So all those in favor of voting in favor of this application for variance with the usual conditions, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, congratulations on your variance. Let me ask you, are you intending to get this shed in there before the snow flies, or are you going to do this in the spring?
I think you all have a couple months before I can actually put it
Yeah,
in.
it'll
Is
take
that
us
how it works?
probably 4 to 6 weeks before your decision
I'll probably
is
wait till the
final.
spring,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and then Mrs. McGetrick will tell you what to do when you get the variance, and just make sure you at least begin executing your variance within a year. So if
Oh,
something
yeah.
comes up and you have troubles of some kind, make sure you talk with Mrs. McGetrick, and she knows how to protect your rights under those circumstances.
Okay.
So congratulations on
Thank
your
you so
new
much.
shed.
I very
Thank
much
you very
appreciate
nice
it.
to
Thank
see
you.
Take this if you want, John.
I'll take it if you want to.
Now we'll give it to Jeffrey. Thank you. Sure, come on up and make yourself comfortable. Let me make some notes on that previous application, or I'll forget what we did.
Take your time, please.
We all set? Okay, we'll call to order our second hearing of the evening. This is a 7:45 hearing. It's the application of Wendell and Sherry Richardson. It's dated September 29th, 2016, seeking to renew a special permit, or at least, I guess, extend or renew a special permit that was previously granted by the board in case number 2357, which allowed a temporary apartment to be located in their single-family residence, which is located at 500 Harlan Street in Milton, Massachusetts. The property is located in a residence AA zoning district. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight is Stephen Lundbohm to my immediate left and Jeffrey Mullen to my immediate right. The board's rules are going to be just like they were at the last one. We'll hear from the applicant. We'll hear from people who want to speak in support of the application, if any. We'll hear from people who want to speak in opposition to the application, if any. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening, so that we'd ask that anyone speak up nice and clear and loud, so we'll be able to pick up everything that's said on the tape. I'll summarize the advertisement. We'll have as evidence at the hearing the September 29th, 2016 application for the renewal of the special permit. We have a letter from the Richardsons regarding the application and seeking the extension. We also have the special permit that was issued to Mr. and Mrs. Richardson. It's dated December 12, 2012, and it runs for a period of 4 years under the terms of the special permit. So we'll have that as evidence at the hearing. The Richardsons are represented by counsel. Why don't you introduce yourself to the board, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Andrew Barrett, and I represent Sherry and Wendell Richardson in this application for the extension of the special permit that was granted for an in-law apartment in their basement back in 2012.
Where's your office, Mr. Barrett?
Quincy, Massachusetts.
Quincy. And you look very familiar. Have you been before us before?
With the Richardsons,
Okay.
specifically in 2012, I represented them in their original application.
Good, we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. As the letter from Wendell and Sherry indicates in their September 26th letter to the board, 2016, the circumstances for the reason for the special permit have not changed. Back in 2012, they made an application which this board unanimously approved. Mr. Leonard, I believe you were chairman that evening. You had different colleagues that evening, but they all approved the special permit. They have two elderly mothers who visit them for extended stay periods that use this in-house apartment when they live temporarily for a good deal of time with their son and daughter-in-law and vice versa. They're elderly women, and they've used this apartment. Nothing has changed. It's exactly the way it was in 2012 when it was originally approved. I believe the square footage was a little over the 800 square feet, is about 880 feet as we agreed. Originally, there was a thought that it was 1,000 feet, but that includes some storage area that we later agreed that did not count. So it was a little over the 800 feet by about 80 square feet. The board approved it. Both their mothers are still with us, getting older, but really use this area for their privacy and to be able to visit their children. We'd asked that it be extended for another 4 years. Again, there have been no objections from any of the neighbors. They all, back in 2012, Nancy Smith of Harlan Street and Anthony Smith, among others, expressed their support for it. There's been no opposition since then and no problems with the use of the space. It is only used for the mothers-in-law. It is not leased. If there's no intention to lease it, there's no intention to use it for any other purpose other than for Wendell's mother and Sherry's mother when they come to stay with them. They'd asked for another 4 years if their mothers can continue to live in this space, and would reconsider the application at that period. But for the next 4 years, we'd ask that the board approve the extension. Again, no objections from any neighbors, and it's the exact same space as it was when this board approved it unanimously back in September of 2012.
Okay,
If you have any questions of my clients, then I'd be happy to answer them.
great. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Barrett or the applicants?
No, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Lundbaum?
No, I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I don't have any questions either. I think these applications are somewhat complex. There's a lot of technical nitty-gritty that you've got to comply with. You've done it once, and I don't think I certainly don't have any questions. Let me, unless you have something further to add, Mr. Barrett?
Nothing to add unless you have any questions,
Oh,
sir.
So let's see if there's anybody present this evening who has any questions of Mr. Barrett or Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, and the record indicates no such person present. And let me ask for the record if there's anyone present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to this application for a special permit for the temporary apartment. And no such person is present, so unless you have something further to add, we'll call to an end this public hearing and consider the application and vote on it here and now. Mr. Lundbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I mean, in that we've been over this, the board has reviewed this matter in detail at another time, and the conditions are all the same. There have been no changes. The need is still is demonstrably still, we need that. The family needs the accommodation here. I would simply vote in favor of the application.
Mr. Mullen, please.
I agree. So on the condition that we renew the permit on the same terms and conditions upon which it was issued on December 12th, 2012, I vote to support the application.
Okay, well, I'm going to vote in favor of this application as well. I thank Mr. Barrett for a wonderful presentation. I remember the presentation you actually made when we allowed this. We went into some of the more gruesome details, but I actually kind of rejoice in the opportunity of extending the special permit because God has been good to you for your parents, your mothers to still be here and able to enjoy your residence, and that's always a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I intend to vote for this extension of the special permit for another 4 years. And just as you did last time, if everything is still going well, make sure you contact Mr. Barrett and come in before the special permit expires, and it's a lot easier to renew it rather than with a new application, going through all the mumbo jumbo and the difficulties of seeking
What
out.
did you do? You put that in your Outlook calendar to know that? How did they know? How did
Mr.
you know?
Barrett did, he must have. He knew.
And 4 years came around and the bells all rang.
Yeah?
Well, good for you. Yeah. So all those in favor of renewing this special
would've
permit on
forgotten.
the same terms and conditions? Mr.
Aye.
Mullen?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations. Thank you for coming
Thank you, Mr.
tonight.
Leonard. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mary,
Best of
thank
luck.
you.
Thanks.
I would have forgotten. Yeah, a little sticky. Little 2016. We'll see you in 2020.
Enjoy the World Series.
Well, we hope we see you.
Every presidential year, that's what it is. That's how you
Every
remember.
presidential year, that's
Every
right.
time the
Yeah.
president runs.
Isn't that interesting?
I'll
We're
look
gonna
out
be
for
back.
it.
Come and
That's a good
vote.
idea.
We'll see you in 2020.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
The Cubs are in the World Series.
That's one way to, well, one way to remember it, right? How do you remember it? And Ed,
Yeah,
how do you remember?
Mr.
Chairman?
Cochran?
just imagine.
Hi, how are you?
17 years after we coached the Cubs, they finally made the World Series.
Oh, has it been that long?
It has been.
Oh,
that
my
long. I
God.
was just thinking about that.
That's funny. We were loaded. Cubs were loaded
Really?
in the day. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
7-year-old baseball.
We all set for our third hearing, Mr. Corcoran? Okay. The third hearing is the 8 o'clock hearing. It's the application of Vin John LLC. The application is dated October 5, 2016. And here the applicant is seeking a special permit in a variance regarding a mixed-use property which is located at 37 Central Avenue in Milton. The building is a pre-existing non-conforming structure, having been constructed in 1925, and the applicant is proposing to put an addition on the left rear of the property, and we'll let Mr. Corcoran get involved in the details of that. And the applicants, if they get the special permit and the variance here, also need site plan approval, apparently from the planning board. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that, and I can explain
You
why.
must have picked that up from Mr. Kondak's letter.
I did. Well,
Oh.
it was in
That-
Mr.
that's why we
Prondak's
put it
letter.
in
It's
the
not the
ad.
relief that I've requested, but I don't agree
Okay.
that I need site plan approval.
All right, well, we're delighted to hear from you on that issue, because sometimes if you need site plan approval, we'd rather have you go to the planning board first and get their imprimatur rather than spending a lot of money on variance and special permit hearings and going to the planning board and having a more difficult time than you should have. And if the planning board does want to make certain changes to your proposal, it's easy to incorporate them into the variance once we know what they are. Otherwise, you have to come back to us, and it becomes more complicated. So, with all of that as an ado, let me tell you that my name's John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening, to my immediate right, is board member Jeffrey Mullen, and to my immediate left is board member Stephen Lundbohm. The rules of the board are just at the first hearing. We'll hear from the applicant, people who have questions to ask of the applicant, people who want to speak in support of the applications for relief here, and anyone who wants to speak in opposition to the application. In addition to the advertisement, which I've summarized, we're going to have as evidence the October 4th, 2016 application. We do have a memorandum that's been submitted. Well, I thought we had a memorandum. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong things. We do. We have a memorandum by Attorney Ned Corcoran of Quincy, Massachusetts. It's in one page. I was looking for your signature or something that indicated this came from you, but I'm missing it. Maybe the page is missing. We have a 9/28/16 denial letter from Mr. Prondak, which Mr. Corcoran says he's going to address as part of his presentation tonight. We also have an existing conditions plan by DeSalle and Burke, as well as a proposed conditions plan for the property. They're both dated September 19th, 2016, and they're signed by Claudio Sala, maybe Sala, a professional land surveyor for DeSalle and Burke. And we also have a series of 2 plans by Brian R. Saluti, S-A-L-U-T-I, Architect, Inc. of Sharon, Massachusetts. And the first plan shows the proposed renovations to the first floor of the property, which is proposed to be converted into office space. And the exterior the existing second floor plan, which is intended to be renovated. It's consisting of 2 bedrooms, a living room and a kitchen, and the basement is shown. And we have an exterior plan, the proposed renovations to the exterior by Mr. Saluti, and that these plans are dated September 28th, 2016. So with all of that as a rather long preamble, Mr. Corcoran, it's good to see you again. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals. We're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm joined by Matthew and Christopher Burke, who are the sons of John Burke, who is the manager and owner of Vin John LLC, which is the applicant and is the owner of the property at 37 Central Avenue in Milton. This is an interesting building. It is, most recently, was a hair salon operated by a woman named Yu-Mei Lee. She lived on the 2nd floor and operated her hair salon on the 1st floor. I have photographs.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran.
And basically, it's a set of photographs. The first 2 show the building as you see it from across Central Street, looking through the trees. And the second is sort of from down below, sort of next to the building that houses the Plate and Keith Mills's wine shop. And the next set of photographs are really relevant to the relief that's requested. As you can see from the existing conditions plan, which is the first plan, there is an existing concrete and covered porch that's on the left-hand side of the building as you face it from Central Avenue. That porch encroaches into the side yard setback. The setback in a business zone is 6 feet. It's either 6 feet or 0 feet if it is coexistent with the lot line. In this case, the porch is, the lengthwise of the porch is skewed to the lot line, so it's at its closest point, it's 4.9 feet, and it's 7 feet at the other end. It didn't make sense to think about skewing, changing the nature of the porch so that it would be coterminous or coexistent with the lot line. The plan is to enclose the porch, and by enclosing it, you're actually adding area around the outside of the concrete porch. And so the proposed condition on the next plan shows that that corner will now increase the encroachment. It's now be 2.8 feet off of the lot line. And simply, the plan is to enclose the porch and make the porch itself part of the interior of the first floor office. And I think would actually make the porch less intrusive for use by the occupants of the building than if you were using the porch as sort of an outdoor living space. All of the activity would now be enclosed and focused into the building as opposed to the outside. the photographs that I've provided show how the porch sits along the lot line, those line of trees that you see so that first photograph shows the porch with the lot line on the left-hand side, the same angle as shown on the plan, and as does the second photograph of the porch. The third shows the porch from the opposite direction, looking back. And really, the plan is to simply enclose that porch. And then the last two photographs show the property as it looks at the next-door neighbor. It's one of the interesting topographical issues here is that this building sits on top of a rock foundation, formation. The lot actually goes sort of up dramatically from Central Avenue and then back down fairly dramatically in the rear to Elliott Street. The house next door at 39 Central is actually set down below as the rock formation sort of rises up beside it. So the second floor level of the house next door, which is in the residence zone, is actually at the first floor level of this building in the business zone. It's one of those sort of anomalies you see in Milton, as the areas of Milton were built out before zoning was put in place. So the relief, the first piece of the relief is simply for permission to further encroach into the side yard setback from 4 feet and change to 2.8 feet to allow that porch to be enclosed and to enclose it off from the notion of that activity on the porch might be of a detriment to the next door neighbor. Mr. Burke did speak on numerous occasions with the owners of the property on the residential properties on the two side lot lines.
Is this Mr. John Burke?
Mr. John Burke. We do not have a writing from either one of them, but they each understands what's happening. There is a lot of construction activity ongoing now that is unrelated to the variance. In fact, I think he's made available for each of their use the dumpster that is on the property, and each one has taken the opportunity to use the dumpster. So the first part of the relief is simply to request that the board grant the ability to enclose that porch. You do see on the proposed conditions plan that there is a handicapped access ramp that actually comes to approximately 3.5 feet and 4 feet off of the two skewed lot lines. I'm advised by Mr. Prondak that we do not need zoning relief for that purpose because handicapped accessible ramps are excluded from zoning. In his judgment, I think I agree with him, but in any event, the only relief we've requested is again, as I say, for the addition itself. The second piece of the relief is to allow the building to be used as a mixed use. It has historically been used as a mixed use, and as I say, Yu Mei, who was the hairdresser who owned the building for a number of years before she sold it to the applicant, lived on the second floor and ran a hair salon on the first floor. Her right to do that would have lapsed with the transfer of the property, and Vinjon is seeking to sort of reinvigorate or seek a new permit for its own mixed use of the building. If this were office over office, it wouldn't require a permit. If it were residence over residence, I don't think it would require a permit, but it is a mix of residential and office, with office on the first floor, proposed apartment on the second floor. In that case, we do need relief under the bylaw. We need a special permit for that purpose. So I think in that case, it's carrying on a use that's somewhat historic to the property, and I think is consistent with the history of the use of the property. I think that relief can be granted without detriment to the neighborhood. So, the last thing I would address would be Mr. Prondak notion that site plan approval is required. He cites to Section 8D1 sub A of the bylaw, which refers to the requirement for site plan approval, and that suggests that no multifamily building, excluding two-family residences, but including an attached single-family residence, shall be constructed or externally enlarged, et cetera, without a site plan bearing endorsement for approval by the planning board. This is not a multifamily dwelling. This is an office with apartment. The language of this bylaw doesn't apply to the nature of the use of this building. So I don't think that site plan approval is necessary, and for that reason, we don't plan to seek site plan approval from the planning board.
Are you asking us to address that issue as part of the decision?
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate for the board to do that, to simply, I didn't specifically address that issue in my filings, but I do think it would be appropriate for the board to take notice of the fact that the bylaw section as identified doesn't apply to the nature of the uses that have been requested in this case.
Otherwise, you could get trapped before different interpretations of the building inspector, saying you haven't received all of the relief you needed, and the planning board doing nothing, and you're not getting building permits, and that's kind of limbo land where you don't want to be.
I think so.
Just one, you mentioned the use of this property, Mr. Corcoran, as a hair salon. Have there been any other previous mixed uses of the property other than the hair salon? And how long was it used as a hair salon? Approximately.
I think a dozen years. I'm not sure that I have a copy of the deed to the property, which would have referenced her prior, yeah, I do have it. So, same premise. Property was purchased in May of 2016. I think she owned it for approximately 10 or 12 years before that. I don't have the date that she previously owned it, but I do know that she had owned it for a while. In fact, her sign is still present on the property. They haven't taken down her sign.
Does it have historical significance?
No.
Okay.
No, and we're not, it's not, doesn't predate 1919, which is the date under the town's bylaw where there's historic.
You're going to have to apply to the Board of Selectmen for a sign permit?
May have to apply for a new sign in accordance with the sign bylaw.
Now this,
It's in the business zone, so under the town's sign bylaw, the Board of Selectmen does have the authority to grant. I may be back in another case on a pre-existing non-conforming use in a residence zone where there are business uses, and I understand that the town is now looking to the Board of Appeals to grant variances to allow signs on businesses on pre-existing non-conforming properties.
which are granted stringently in exceptional circumstances. You probably want to read our decision you probably already have it, in the Seasons Hospice case, which has been rendered. The young lady who owned the Yu Mi Lu, who owned the property previously, she used the second floor as a dwelling.
Yes.
Does the applicant or or any family members intend to occupy this second floor as a dwelling, or is it going to be rented out as a
Yeah, the plan is to rent it out.
Rent it out, okay,
Yep.
sure. So there's going to be a disconnect between the use on the first floor and...
Correct.
Okay, okay. You're not intending to move into the first floor, Mr. Corcoran, are you?
No, I'm not.
And this is not going to be your new law office, is it?
No, but, you know,
Looks like a very convenient space to me.
it would be. I could
Yeah.
walk right down the hill. I could have lunch next door. It'd be wonderful. No, I don't. It's interesting. Mr. Burke has had a long career at Staples, and he,
You, Mr. Burke?
No, is this where the Central Avenue thing is going on? Somebody-
Central, yes, I think we're right in the, we're at the,
37 Central
we're at the
Avenue.
tail end of the Central Avenue thing.
Right, this is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so-
That's it. Mr. Burke was a longstanding employee of Staples, and his thought is to create some sort of an incubator, business type of incubator on the first floor, and to create an office setting for people with new ideas to have a place to come to and work together collaboratively on things like that.
And so the proposed first floor office use is really for, I guess, for 4 offices and a conference room, is that fair to say?
It's laid out with 4, it'd be 1 office with smaller offices, 4 smaller offices, a break room, a conference room, sort of all around common central area, as you can see on the plan.
And does this plan substantially show how you intend to reform the first floor of the building?
Yes.
Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen,
How many
please.
people are going to work there?
So as of now, to be determined, it really, to Ned's point, it's a space that I think, my dad might have intentions of maybe moving his office to, and potentially bringing some folks in almost a consulting type of manner, as he's kind of moving towards the next phase of his career. I mean, right now, as a family, we started this Vinjon LLC as an opportunity for us to invest in something in the town that we grew up in, and I think it could be, a space that we might use, but I would say, as of now, it's probably going to be more for the family business, which is in name the Vinjon LLC. And if
One business?
One business, yeah, one business, I would say, is I think what would make the most sense.
Yeah, so, how many square feet is there?
First floor, I'd have to. Does it show?
Doesn't,
1,375 or so? 1,370? That's what the commissioner said in his letter.
and that's probably about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So we're talking about a building that is currently used, or was most recently used, as for a hair salon on the first floor, and a residential owner-occupied property on the second, being converted to an apartment on the second, and the use of one business on the first.
Correct.
Okay. On the expansion of the property to the left, the enclosure of the porch plus a little bit, did you think about bringing it all the way to the property line? What was the thinking on that? The bylaw seems to, in the business, it encourages or at least permits buildings to be coincident with the property line. I'm wondering why you wouldn't do that. What was your thinking?
I think 2 reasons. One is, I think that bylaw is really intended to address common walls.
Yeah?
And so you see, particularly in, next door and across the street, you have large buildings with multiple settings, but more so in East Milton, where you have buildings with common walls as you go out Adams Street, for example. In this case, I think the feeling was, it is not, if you bring it to the property line, you're not bringing it straight, because there's a skew to the wall. A, and B, you're bringing it, you're really bringing that to the property line and right, and sort of bringing it so that it will loom right over the top of that second floor
Yeah.
of the property next door. I think you really, you know, so the idea was not to extend the encroachment any more than essentially where it's located, but to build a wall and close the area around it.
But isn't it true that under the bylaw, you could avoid asking for a variance by taking advantage of that provision, notwithstanding the impact on the abutter? And what you're asking for is relief that is less than you might otherwise need? Because you could have made the building bigger?
I think that's right. I think it's possible. We could have gone to the property line.
Did you speak to Mrs. Looney? That's a residential, that's the barn, the house that looks like a barn?
Yes.
That's 39 Central? Is
She's
that-
she is in the construction business herself. She works at Gilbane in town. She's had a number of conversations with John Burke. I haven't spoken to her
Yeah,
directly.
I have not, I don't think my brother, we haven't spoken
Can
to
you
her,
make a
but
representation as to what she believes, what's her position on the application?
I know that I was asked to respond to an email that she had sent to Mr. Burke, asking to clarify what the dimensions were.
Yeah,
And so we responded to that back. That was a week ago. Mr. Burke had had several conversations with her otherwise, but she was looking at the last set of the plans and just wanted to be clear in her mind what the dimensions were and how that might affect her.
okay, so she's certainly aware of it,
Yeah.
but she hasn't specifically said one way or the other what her position is?
She has said to Mr. Burke, as I understand it, that she's comfortable with what's happening and she has no issues. I haven't spoken to her.
Okay,
I did prepare a draft of letters of support for abutters. Those were not, I don't think Mr. Burke gave them to her to look at and sign, but we don't have a written acknowledgement. All we have is the oral.
how about the people in the back there, Andrew and Jessica? That's a residential property, right?
correct,
Same,
Accessed off of Elliott, I think?
correct.
correct, yeah.
Same issue. Direct conversations. They've made use of the dumpster that's out there with the permission of Mr. Burke and the contractor who's out there. They've had direct conversations about what's happening. They've shown the plans. But, you know, obviously they're not here.
Okay.
And so my understanding is that they understand what's happening. They agree with what's happening.
Okay. So there's 6 parking spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right?
There are 6 shown on there, plus a garage.
Plus the garage, and the garage is going to be used for a vehicle?
Garage will either be used for a vehicle or may be removed and replaced with an outdoor parking space.
Okay.
But Mr. Prondak's letter indicates that there's an adequacy of parking in accordance with the bylaw.
The, what is the handicap ramp made out of?
It currently doesn't exist.
I know, but-
Okay. I believe the plan was it to be.
Metal, wood?
I think it was gonna be a concrete ramp, I thought, but I think there's also the option to do, what would you call, almost like an electric raised
He's
handicap
still
ramp. I
look-
think there's 2 options. If
They're
there's,
still looking at options
excuse me.
to whether or not the ramp would be as it's currently shown on the plan, or whether they might come up with some other option that would be less intrusive and less expensive to build than a long ramp.
Okay.
We know, based on Mr. Prondak's representation, that it is not subject to meet the zoning relief, so I think Mr. Burke may be going back a little bit to the drawing board and what the final,
Yeah, but what the ramp is doing is it's providing an ulterior access point to the side, right? And that's how handicap, that's the main handicap
Actually-
access to the building?
actually, there's some adjustment that is gonna may need to be made because the new, the entry, on the corner that's
That's coming
closest-
out, and it's gonna be part of the
It's
addition.
coming out, it's part of the addition.
Right.
He's actually gotta bring that ramp over to that.
Oh, the ramp is gonna,
It has to-
provide
it has
access to the,
come over
directly to the
there.
rear?
It has to,
Because of equal accommodation?
that's right.
Yeah, that was the nature of my question. The handicap, the access shown here puts you in the break room.
That's right. It brings you in that side door. And so it's one of the issues that the architect and Mr. Burke are dealing with Mr. Prondak as they come up with this final plan for handicapped accessibility.
So there's a reasonable accommodation issue. The plans are gonna be modified to provide reasonable accommodations under ADA. Okay. I think under 4A, I think I know we've been talking a lot about mixed use. I think technically it's, we should just read it. We're talking about valid, pre-existing non-conforming structures may be extended, altered, reconstructed, or replaced, substantially similar for such purposes. It may have been lawfully used if authorized by a special permit from the Board of Appeals. We've talked about that a lot. I just wanted to put that on the record. And then, the other question I had is, I wondered if the building commissioner was speaking to section D1B, when he talked about the change, the approval by the planning board, dealing with more than 800 square feet of a commercial building, except if the interior renovation work makes no change in the exterior appearance of a commercial building, it shall be excluded from this site plan requirement. I don't think it's well referenced in the letter, but I don't know whether or not that's an issue. Do you see that? You don't have the bylaw with you.
I don't have it, but I do have a copy of
The letter?
that section of the bylaw, and I do have a copy of the letter, and, I will say that Mr. Prondak is generally pretty thorough.
He's pretty good.
And he's pretty precise.
He's pretty good. I agree.
And he and I met at the time that he produced this letter
Okay.
to make sure that we were clear with each other as to what relief.
But he's saying you do have to go to the planning board. And
He says in this case, for this reason, and he didn't raise that as we were talking about it, and when I look at it, under 8D1,
8D1B.
that's right.
Let me just put it out there, maybe I don't know whether or not we're gonna talk about it. I know the applicant asked for us to make a ruling on it, but I think we wanna really understand what section is being referenced by the building inspector before we make a ruling, and that was a little bit of a, here, I can.
Well, we don't have that, do we? I don't,
You have the building inspector's letter,
right.
and then you have the requirement of the bylaw right there.
Yeah,
My
I think
handy notebook.
section B, we're adding a fairly small area to the building as a whole.
Yeah, maybe the question is whether or not there's interior renovation work that makes no change to the exterior appearance of a commercial building shall be excluded from the site plan review. But there's exterior work included, so part of the question really is how many square feet of the commercial building are being reconstructed.
Or altered.
Yeah.
Do we have
So
that?
we
I
just
don't- I
park
don't
that
think we
issue. Well, the building commissioner says it's 1,371 square feet. And that's in the letter, that's in the denial letter. So, that's those are the only questions I have.
have. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mullen. Mr. Lundbaum?
No, my question was answered in regard to the abutter. I did have a question, Attorney Cochran, on the porch. Is that roof line bumping out as well? Or are you just coming right under that roof? Appears to,
Yeah, I know that the
What the distance
bylaw
would be.
allows an additional 18 inches for eaves. I don't, as I look at the exterior renovation, it's not clear from the plan whether there's a change to the existing roof line. It doesn't appear that there is. It looks like it's coming out to the, essentially to the edge of the eave, because if you look at the photograph, there's a fairly substantial overhang
Right.
of the existing sort of roof over the concrete patio.
Is there any use proposed for the basement area? What is down there now? Is that a dirt floor?
Don't know what's down there.
It's unfinished, but it's certainly not a dirt floor, but there's no proposed use for it as of now, beyond, storage. I think there's laundry down there now, which, wouldn't make sense to have that there anymore, because that'll be moved to the, that'll be for the apartment, which is gonna be on the second floor. So as of now, no proposed use.
Don't have any other questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lundbaum. Mr. Corcoran, do you have anything you'd like to add, or shall we move on?
No, I'm happy to have the board.
Okay, so Mr. Corcoran has finished his presentation. Is there anybody present this evening who has any questions regarding this application or otherwise wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
Sure. Is this for a special permit or a variance, this meeting?
It's for, I think, both.
He's actually asking for both.
I'm sorry, so you have to come up here and,
Oh,
because you have to be on mic. We can't hear you very well.
I'd
Would you be
like to
kind
see
enough
the
to start?
plans and stuff if I could, just
Sure.
quickly.
Would you do me a favor first? Let's pull the mic close to you, or reasonably close. And why don't you tell us your name and address so we'll have the record?
What do you want, which address do you want?
How about the address?
One
that's-
pertinent to
that's
this?
pertinent and closest to the subject property.
Okay, Scott Johnson, owner of 54 Central Avenue, Milton.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Johnson.
It's nice to be back.
Where is 54?
So this is where the deli is here?
I don't know.
Where is 54?
It's further up the street on the other side.
54 is sort of cat-a-corner across the street from Looney's.
You're across the street.
Across from,
Oh,
beyond
from Louis.
37 Central, the 36 Central, the new
Right,
building at
towards-
36, towards School Street.
School and Maple, yeah. So Ned, what's going on for you? You're gonna what, push, where are they pushing out?
An existing porch. Here. Less than 6 feet from that lot line. Plan is to enclose that porch. Part of the inside of the building. And go another 2 feet to this corner.
And it's presently zoned for business at this point?
Yes. it's
So
in
we're not
business
changing
zone.
the zoning that
We're not
much.
changing the zoning.
Just, yeah.
It's the edge of the business zone. These two properties are in the residence zone.
Yeah. The only question I have is it possible, how many people are gonna be working in here long-term? And in terms of parking in this area, the parking has gotten really, really tough on the street. From a standpoint of the other business owners, but also from a standpoint of the residents, I have tenants that live there. So,
There's 7 parking spaces in the lot off of Elliott Street that will be dedicated, obviously, to the use of that building. The building commissioner's made a determination that that is adequate for parking under the bylaw.
but theoretically, if there became more than 7 cars working there, they'd then have to use the street.
Theoretically, if you can put 7 people in that small office building, you could do that, that'd be right.
I can see you doing that.
I would say it's across the street from a transit station, and that it is, albeit it is an area that's tight for parking generally, but it is one of the few properties that actually provides parking for its own purposes.
Yeah. I'm just curious, theoretically, a 6x6 area is what, it takes about 36 square feet per employee. You've got about 1,300 square feet here, so there could theoretically, let's say there's one person to a car, there could be 2 people, I'm sure. You could put more than 7 people in there, in that space, definitely to work. Is there a way to limit the number of people that can work in the building or cars that can come there type of thing to sort of keep the parking open?
Well, certainly, we could limit the number of spaces to the 7 spaces that they have.
No, I'm talking about,
Like, we can't be limiting the number, to my mind, we can't limit the number of people who can occupy the office space.
I mean, it's gotten really, really hard to park around there, you know?
How many parking spaces do you have for the residential, for the multifamilies that you own?
I think we've got 6.
Your spaces?
Yeah, off
So you're-
street. Yeah, it's a large area, but, I'm just trying to think long-term about potential problems. I mean, that area has gotten really congested since, you know, I've owned that property since 1989, and it's very, very different than it was then. And I'm not trying to cause trouble.
No, yeah, no,
I'm
it's
just-
reasonable questions, yeah.
Just trying to think out loud. But I don't have a problem with the extension or anything, you know.
It seems to be a dramatic improvement to the property and to the use that's being made of the property. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Johnson. I guess the issue that I have is if it's compliant, then, and if they need 8 spaces or 9 spaces, that they just can't be accommodated on site, and they'd have to find parking that's lawful parking elsewhere in the neighborhood. Mr.
There isn't
Mullin,
any. Not lawful, because it's all signed there now. It's all limited by time. So the business owner is going to have trouble really accommodating employee parking other than on the premises, given the signage that's in the neighborhood. There's a lot of 15-minute in there now, and there's some longer period down the road. I mean, I know most of it is because of the
1,
restaurant
2 hours, yeah.
and the tea. But I agree with you. I think parking's a problem. We've been looking at this coming for quite a while with the changes at Central Ave and Elliott Street. I mean, the other side of it is people are happy to see the business, you know, I understand, so, but I mean, I think the business doesn't have a really good option for anything other than on-premise. And I think you have to understand that. I mean, that's one thing we could say in our decision. We could say we recognize that the business doesn't have that. And I know the town has been pretty vigilant in the enforcement of on-street parking, mostly to accommodate the nearby residential and business, you know, precisely
Yeah.
the point that you're making,
Yeah.
which, you know, as one member of the board, I would endorse. And I have trouble finding a parking space when I go visit my friend Sonny, you know? But-
Well, you know, the one thing I will say, you know, I'm a businessman, so I look at what they do have. They do have something that a lot of people don't have down there, and that is they do have some parking. Which, so, I mean, I guess I don't have any problems with it at this point, after looking at it. I just wanted to see what was going on, that's why I
Yeah,
came by.
fair point.
Could I maybe share just a perspective of kind of the intentions of the business too? And I referenced it earlier, Mr. Johnson, but so Chris, yeah, nice to meet you, Scott. So this is my brother Matt. So we started our LLC with, you know, my father and my sister, our 3 siblings. We did grow up in Milton. And for us, it's not necessarily an expansion business. It's more an opportunity to invest in the town. Actually, my dad for years worked at that Oscar Drug that was in Central Ave. My mom lived on Central Ave for a while. So there's some sentimental kind of piece to it. And we're really looking for good tenants on the first floor and a small business on the, I'm sorry, good tenants on the second floor from an apartment perspective and some small business for really the unforeseeable future. I think it's probably going to be more family occupied to kind of continue this idea of the Vinjon LLC. What can we do?
Has your family owned the building for a long time, or just?
No, we just bought it. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. We just bought. We kind of formed. It was for years. We've talked about let's do something, and this is kind of on a lot of different cylinders has been a nice opportunity for us. So just to speak to that point, we're not looking. Hey, can we expand this as a place that we can get multiple businesses in? It's more really a rental property that we're looking for good tenants that believe in hopefully what we all do with the town of Milton. So
Great, welcome to the neighborhood. Good
thanks.
luck to you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So I'd
Thank you.
actually like to pick up on that. No, I don't, you can go, you can do whatever you'd like.
Thank
We
you,
don't
gentlemen.
control-
Thank you,
service.
thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for coming down. Good to see you.
This point
Thanks,
that you
Scott.
made about the business,
Sure.
I picked up on and asked questions because I do think I do think there's a difference between asking for variances and relief from the Board of Appeals for one business versus several businesses.
Sure.
I think that's a whole different kind of use.
Sure.
So I'd like to suggest to the board that we have that dialogue at the appropriate time about one business versus multiple businesses in this location. So, for example, to me, this is very different than, especially with respect to the standard of extending the nonconformity, this is very different than a shared work environment, which would drive more employees and potentially be a more intense use than, as you said, you've really got two uses here, one office and one residential space, which is what I'm hearing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
No,
that's
so
what
I
I'm
would
hearing.
say, if there's an opportunity to have two small businesses, if it made sense from an employee and a parking standpoint.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is the intention isn't to, for this to be some sort of kind of expansion type of, I don't even know what the right word would be, but maybe shared working space or
Right.
something like that. It's more, a place for a good business to have a spot. But I think we're, completely aware that there's a really nice opportunity because there is parking there, and I don't think it's never really been part of our dialogue that, hey, we won't have enough. It's more, wow, we have 7 parking spots. I actually thought there were 8, but I guess I believe the plan's that it's 7.
It could be
so,
8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was technically, I
You
could be wrong,
You
yeah,
could
I
probably
could be
do a
wrong on
better
that.
job with that parking, that striping, yeah.
Right, so, that's kind of really what our short-term plans are. It's really more, first priority is tenants upstairs. Second priority is, let's see what we can do with it kind of as a small family business, and if there's an opportunity for someone, that we identify to come in and make a business, then that's really kind of the intent of what this has been for us.
Fair enough.
Mr. Lundbaum, do you want to be heard on that issue, or are you off?
No, I mean, I think that's a good notion that you put out there. I mean, as you make your way through this thing, if the relief is granted and you find that you're of a mind to expand sort of the use in terms of the business, you're going to you may run into issues with the neighborhood.
Right.
If you try to push the parking. But, as it stands now, you've got 7 spaces. You might be able to do a little bit better out back there, but I would just suggest that you go with the notion that it's going to be something you're going to have to keep in mind that as you move forward.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Corcoran, you all set?
I am all set.
Okay, so why don't we end the evidence portion of the hearing, and we'll discuss this application in open session. So, Mr. Mullen, you seemed interested on the office space. Do you want to speak first?
So I think the application is an improvement to the property, and with respect to the variance, I think that the requested relief is less than the owner is entitled to technically under the variance, and could be said to be accommodating the property owner by effectively pulling that building back from the property line. Since the way I read the bylaw, even though I agree with the applicant that it leans on party walls, it's not exclusively to party walls. So on the, with the idea that the relief, which, we don't typically grant relief in the variance relief in the business zone, when it's less than what's otherwise permitted under the bylaw, I think that that's different. And given the fact that it's going to improve the use of the building and permit the use of the building to be viable, I'd support that. With respect to the expansion or continuation of the nonconformity, the only thing I would say is, I think, I heard a couple of different things. I really do want to understand what the use is, and we've got it in the ad and in the application as a mixed-use commercial space. I said, because I thought I heard 1 residential unit, 1 commercial unit. If I'm not hearing that, we should know that now, because I'm going to propose that something like that be written into this bylaw, into this decision, to the extent we approve it, because I think that when you're talking about the expansion of a nonconformity, I want to know how many businesses are going to be in there. And it's going to be a bigger building than it is now. And maybe we could say Not more than 2, that would be okay, but I think it goes to the testimony that we heard. So I'd like to ask for the board to consider that. With respect to the parking, it is what it is, and I really do think the town has done what it can do with the on-street, with the off-street parking, and I don't know that it requires anything more than an acknowledgement in any decision the board might reach that the applicant is expected to accommodate the users of the building's parking on premise. And I think that's fair. And then, my only real remaining question is, I don't think we should get into whether or not the planning board has or doesn't have jurisdiction here, and I don't know that we have to. I respect the fact that the planning board, we like the planning board to be heard first because they often get into details about site plan review and aesthetics and things. We tend to deal with the technical nitty-gritty, and they tend to deal with the built environment and the public realm much more than we do. And I have a lot of respect for that, but I'd like to suggest to the board that we not make a ruling on that, and that it is what it is. And if the applicant needs to get approval of the planning board for site plan review, then the applicant needs to get approval. And I don't know that the Board of Appeals should or needs to say anything specific about that. So that's what I have to say about this. But overall, I think it's an improvement to the neighborhood, and I think it's, I think it merits a lot of support.
Mr. Lundvall.
I agree with Jeff. I know the property well, having lived in the town for 25 years and spent significant time down in the village area there. And it's certainly an improvement to what's there. I think in terms of the variance side of the application, I don't have a problem with the proposal. The neighbors are on board, it seems, it appears. Again, not a significant encroachment in my view, and as Jeff pointed out, in fact, they may have the ability to go further without needing relief, but they've sought the relief, and I think they deserve it in this instance. With respect to the parking, I don't see that the applicants have done anything wrong yet in terms of overburdening the area. I think Jeff's proposal or his notion that we perhaps suggest that there be singular commercial use or not more than 2, I think is a good suggestion. I would be in agreement with that. But I think the applicant has acknowledged that they would be up against it in terms of pushback from the neighbors if there's a sense that they're overburdening the area with employee parking or whatnot. And I think they get that. And in terms of the site plan issue, I agree with Jeff. I don't think we should. I don't think we can, because it just seems that there's a bit of an ambiguity in the denial letter. To me, Mr. Prondak references section 8D, but he doesn't specify A or B, and I think that's the difference there that we can't really get into. But other than that, I would tend to favor the application as put forth.
Okay, well, my view of this, I thought the application was very, very well presented. This is somewhat of a technical application. It requires a lot of thought and a lot of detail. And I think sometimes you can get caught up in too much of the detail and miss the big picture. The big picture is that this is a dramatic improvement to the property for the benefit not only of the landowners, but for the benefit of the adjacent owners and the entire area. This is a very vibrant, busy area, and this use as an office use and the improved residential use, to me, is something that is of benefit to the town and to the area. It's a more productive, let's just say it in the sense, it's a more productive use of the property. It's more professional use of the property, and it's something that would enhance this Central Avenue area and not denigrate it. With that having been said, I think the application does seek less relief than you could get. I think the parking is adequate, and I find it difficult to criticize the applicant when the building inspector has said they have adequate parking under the bylaw. I do understand the concern that if you put 4 or 5 lawyers in there, you could run into all kinds of problems, but the applicant has indicated that that's not what you intend to do. And you intend to use this space as family space, and it looks perfect for a family space. But on the other hand, I think it's unwise to overly restrict the use of the office space, because this is a substantial investment for the applicants, and if they want to broaden that slightly by perhaps having 2 business uses in the office space, as Jeffrey, Mr. Mullen suggests, I don't think they should have to come back to the Board of Appeals for that. And
I agree.
so we have to use some common sense here, and yet we have to give the applicant some flexibility if for some reason they want to expand the use. So in that sense, I agree with Mr. Mullen. I think it's an excellent suggestion that we say that there shouldn't be more than 2 businesses in there at any one time, and I think that's treating the applicant fairly. And if for some reason you needed more uses, you're going to have a track record of how this property is performed, and you may have an argument to put 3 businesses in there, but you'd have to come back for an amendment. With respect to the building permit issue, I strike it. The site plan review issue, I do think I understand what Mr. Prondak is saying, and I think Jeffrey said it correctly, that he's saying there's 1,300 square feet of building there, and he believes that requires site plan review. I guess we're not here to make advisory opinions. It's not a part of this application. And we do rely on Mr. Prondak as the first interpreter of our bylaw, and I know that Mr. Prondak always keeps an open mind on these issues. It's not technically part of this. He did mention it, and I know that he'd be delighted to discuss that issue further with Mr. Corcoran, who can be equally persuasive and diligent. So my view is I agree with the consensus of my colleagues. I'm thrilled to see this improvement. We should be welcoming the applicants to this building and for the money they're investing in the building. And it's an area that's a vibrant area, and I think this is going to contribute to the continued upgrade and improvement of this particular area. So I intend to vote for this application with the relief that everyone here has agreed upon. Mr. Mullen, do you have anything further to say?
Yes.
Yes, I thought you did. You looked like you were winding up.
I didn't speak about the 2 applications in front, so I saved them all up for the 3rd one.
You did indeed.
So there's a standard provision that the board usually has that you comply with all applicable law. So I don't want to say anything about the compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, as important as that act is and how I feel about it. So I think that's covered. But I do think we should refrain from, we oftentimes in a decision will say that the improvements will be substantially as done on the plan that's been submitted with the application. And that's true in this case, except with respect to the handicap ramp. So I think that any decision reached by the board should reference that and should require the applicant to file with the board some type of modified plan showing the improvements. I don't want to say as-built plan because that's a real technical term, but something showing how it's been improved. I think we want to have in our file the final condition of where that ramp is for when we take up this file again few years down the road, and we've got an outdated plan. So I would just like for the board to both note in the decision that the improvements need to be constructed substantially as shown on the plan, with the exception of the handicap ramp, which will be revised, as discussed at the hearing, and require the applicant to submit a revised plan in due course, whatever makes sense. I mean, you'll need one for the building permit anyway, so, you know.
Well, why wouldn't that happen? Why wouldn't the revised plan be provided to Mr. Prondak?
Yeah, it will.
When he issues the building permit.
It won't have to find its way in this file.
Right, we'll have Mrs. Fitzgerald make a note that when the building permit
Okay.
issues, the revised plan will be filed with this file, so we'll have it, but yet you're not seeking our approval or any comments
That's
from
right.
us.
Yeah, no, I'm
It's
not.
really for the building inspector to deal with that issue.
Yeah.
Does that
I just
make
want to have the plan find its way into the file. And I see that Mrs. Fitzgerald has made that note as requested by the chair.
She has, so I think that's the preferred way of doing it. Do you agree with that, Mr.?
Yes, good point.
Okay, so all of those in favor of the special permit and the variance application as presented with the conditions that we've discussed here, please say aye.
Right.
Aye.
So, Mr. Corcoran and gentlemen, Mrs. Burke, it's been a little bit longer night than we expected, but congratulations on
Thank
your
you. Yeah,
special
appreciate
permit
the time.
and variance, and good luck with this. This is a terrific improvement.
We're excited
Love
to
to
do
see
that.
it.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
You know, I would have bet money that you were Vin and you were John. Who are they?
How'd you know? Actually, our grandfather, Vincent and John.
Yeah, John.
It was actually, it's John with an H, but for, we could drop the H, it seemed like
Yeah,
it. Three letters, the VIN and the VA and
Whatever you want.
JON.
What do you prefer?
Ask what he wants to do, I'll do whatever you want to do.
I'm looking at you, I'm saying this.
I'll take the other one from him if you want.
And I do look like my grandfather
Hold on.
Vincent, so that's actually,
We're waiting for the
Thank you,
ceremony.
Vin, John.
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you guys.
Okay,
Take care.
Thank you.
the question is, I'm gonna write this one, I'll take this one back.
Yeah, fine.
Okay? Because you were more in tone for that one. So Jeffrey's going to write,
Cubs up three zip.
No way.
really?
Third inning.
Thanks, Ned.
Thanks, Ned.